Something shifted this week, not loudly, not with the kind of clarity that makes a decision feel like a decision. More like the quiet after a long sound finally stops. More like the moment your eyes adjust and you realize the room has been lit this way for a while, and you were just too tired to notice. Something in you moved, and the thing that moved was not hope, not grief, not the familiar current of longing that you have learned to navigate the way you navigate a room you have memorized in the dark. What moved was something older than all of that, something underneath the longing, something that has been waiting, with more patience than you have shown yourself in a very long time, for you to finally turn toward it. You have been choosing him for so long, not always consciously, not always in the ways that are visible from outside. You chose him when you softened what you actually thought so the conversation would not go somewhere difficult. You chose him when you stayed quiet about the things that mattered most to you, because his reaction felt more important than your truth. You chose him every time you rearranged yourself, sometimes just a little, sometimes in ways you did not even track, to fit better inside the shape of what felt safe between you. You chose him when you made his silence your project and his confusion your emergency and his eventual return, the primary organizing principle of how you spent your interior life. That is what choosing him has looked like, beneath all the love, beneath all the genuine recognition and the real connection and the parts that were never wrong. A slow, continuous, mostly invisible editing of yourself in the direction of what he needed, what he could handle, what would keep the thread between you from breaking entirely. And something this week, this sky, this particular configuration of Venus and the lunar nodes pressing on the precise degree of your soul contract, has made that editing suddenly, finally, impossible to continue. If you feel it, if there is something in your chest right now that recognizes this moment, that knows you have been slowly arriving here for longer than you can fully measure, leave a like and subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Drop the words "I choose me" in the comments. Because what is happening inside you right now is not a loss. It is the most accurate move this journey has ever asked you to make. Right now, you are making one of the biggest internal moves of this journey without knowing if the timing is right. That is the part nobody talks about, not whether the love is real. You know if the love is real. The question underneath everything you are feeling this week is whether this moment, this particular shift inside you, is the one the universe has been building toward. Or whether you are still early, whether he is where you think he is. Whether the soul contract you signed with this person actually has a next chapter. And if it does, what it requires from you specifically, not from divine feminines in general, from you. Your birth chart answers that. Not with vague encouragement. With the precise coordinates of your connection, what the universe is currently orchestrating between you, what karmic patterns have been keeping you in the choosing him loop, and what your soul contract says this phase is actually for. This is exactly what a twin flame union personal reading is for. You can order yours right now, and within 48 hours you will have a personal audio reading and a detailed written report built entirely from your specific coordinates, your name, your date of birth, your exact time of birth, your place and country. Not guidance written for a crowd. The precise map of your connection, pulled from your chart alone. Here is why now matters. Venus squaring the lunar nodes is exact today. Your chart is more legible right now than it will be for months. A reading pulled from the sky at this moment gives you the clearest possible picture of where you actually are and what comes next. The link is below. Get your reading while this transit is still active. On April 29th, 2026, Venus at 7 degrees Gemini is squaring the lunar nodes. That is not a soft transit. A Venus square to the nodes is one of the most specifically relational aspects the sky produces. The nodes of the moon describe your karmic trajectory, the axis between where you have been and where your soul is moving, the unfinished work and the unmet destination. When Venus, the planet of love and self-worth and what you are willing to accept in your closest connections, sits in hard square to that axis, it creates a friction point. a forced confrontation between what you have been choosing in love and where your soul actually needs to go. Squares are not comfortable. They do not ease you into awareness. They press. They create a tension that builds until something gives, until a choice becomes unavoidable that had been hoverable before, until the thing you have been managing becomes unmanageable. Not because the circumstances changed, but because you changed, because something inside you is no longer willing to keep holding the posture that the management requires. Venus is also in Gemini right now, moving alongside Uranus, which entered Gemini just 4 days ago. Uranus in Gemini is electrical. It breaks patterns of communication, of self-expression, of the stories you have been telling about who you are and what you need and what you are willing to accept. Venus in that field, with Uranus right beside her, is the planet of love in the process of rewiring. Not gently, with the particular speed and clarity that Uranus always brings. You may have felt it as a sudden knowing, a thought that arrived without the usual buildup. A sentence that formed in your mind with a completeness that surprised you because you have not been able to articulate this, not this cleanly, not this quickly, until now. The nodes in Pisces and Virgo complete the picture. Pisces holds the realm of dissolution, of the spiritual, of what we sacrifice in the name of love. Virgo holds the realm of discernment, of service to the right things, of the body that knows what the mind keeps negotiating with. Venus squaring both says something very specific. The way you have been loving, the specific shape your love has taken in this dynamic, the sacrificing of self that has lived under the name of devotion is at a crossroads. And the crossroads is asking for a choice that cannot be made by staying in the middle. Murray Bowen spent decades studying what happens to individuals inside their most intimate relationships, specifically the mechanisms by which people trade their own selfhood for the feeling of connection. He called the capacity to maintain a defined self while remaining genuinely connected to another person differentiation. And what he found, through years of clinical work and family systems research, was that the degree to which a person can remain themselves inside an emotionally intense relationship determines everything. The quality of the love available, the stability of the connection over time, the capacity for genuine intimacy rather than the merged, anxious closeness that looks like intimacy but functions like dependency. Differentiation is not distance. That is the thing that gets misunderstood most often. A highly differentiated person is not someone who has protected themselves from feeling deeply. They feel everything, but they feel it as themselves. They do not lose the thread back to their own interior in the midst of the emotional field of the relationship. They can be moved without being swept away. They can love without editing. They can stay close without disappearing. What happens in a twin flame separation and the particular crucible of this dynamic is that the divine feminine often arrives in late separation, having lost that thread somewhere along the way. Not because she is weak, not because she loved incorrectly, because the intensity of the connection is so powerful, the pull so specific, the recognition so complete, that staying fully herself inside it required a kind of psychological strength that is not built overnight and is not built in the absence of exactly this kind of pressure. The soul chose a connection that would require her to develop that strength. The separation is the development. David Schnarch, who extended Bowen's work into couples therapy and what he called the crucible approach, described a process he called people growing. The idea that the primary function of an intimate relationship is not to make you comfortable. It is to make you more fully yourself, and that process is not gentle. It operates through the precise discomfort of being known and staying anyway, of being close enough to the most intense thing you have ever felt and choosing in that closeness not to disappear. The moment the divine feminine stops choosing him and chooses herself is not the moment the love ends. It is the moment she finally enters the relationship from a differentiated place, even if the external circumstances of the separation have not yet changed. Something internal reorganizes. She is no longer managing the connection from a contracted version of herself. She is meeting it from the full one. There is a version of this that gets circulated in spiritual content that makes choosing yourself sound clean, empowering in the immediate cinematic way. Like she stood up and walked out and the music swelled and something closed neatly behind her. The reality of the moment is almost never like that. The reality is usually quieter and more confusing and threaded through with grief, even when it is the most correct thing she has ever done. Because choosing yourself when you have been organized around someone else for a long time does not feel like relief right away. It feels like the specific vertigo of a reorientation. Like the moment after you've been looking in one direction for so long that turning your head towards something else creates a disorientation that is physical, that lives in the body before it lives in the mind. There is something in her chest that does not immediately say yes. Something that has become so accustomed to the orientation toward him that the new direction feels uncertain even when it is right. She may feel it as a kind of guilt, as if choosing herself is a betrayal of something real, as if the love required her to keep giving herself away and the withdrawal of that self-giving means the love is also withdrawing. It does not. The love is not located in the self-abandonment. The love was always real independently of whether it came packaged with the editing of herself. What she is withdrawing is not the love. It is the habit. And habits that have organized your interior life for months or years do not release without a feeling that resembles loss, even when what is actually happening is recovery. She may also notice in the first days of this shift an unfamiliar spaciousness. Pockets of time and interior attention that used to be occupied entirely by thoughts of him, by the calculation of where he is and what he is doing and what his silence means, that are now not empty, quieter. And that quiet can feel disorienting in its own way because she has been running so much cognitive and emotional energy in his direction for so long that the quiet almost feels like something is wrong. Nothing is wrong. She is simply returning to herself, getting reacquainted with the interior of her own life, which has been waiting for her with more patience than she gave it credit for. That is what Bowen meant by differentiation in practice, not the theory of it. The actual felt texture, the vertigo and the guilt and the unfamiliar quiet, the grief that is real even when the choice is right, the strange sensation of standing on your own ground again after a long time of standing almost entirely on someone else's. There is a very specific pattern that Bowen documented across decades of clinical work with couples and family systems, and it is one of the most important things to understand about what happens when the divine feminine shifts. When one person in an emotionally fused system begins to differentiate, the other person's system detects the change before the conscious mind registers it. This is not metaphysical. It is the nervous system doing exactly what it is built to do, which is monitor the emotional field of the primary attachment relationship for changes. And when the field changes, the response is often an escalation, a surge, an increase in the behavior that was previously working to keep the dynamic stable. Not because he has decided to escalate, because his system is attempting to restabilize a field that suddenly feels different, and the strategy it reaches for is the one it already knows. This can look like distance becoming more pointed, or it can look like sudden warmth appearing after a long cold stretch. Or it can look like the specific phenomenon that twin flames in separation have described consistently. He reaches out or he reactivates at exactly the moment she genuinely stops reaching toward him, not as a manipulation, as an almost mechanical response to a shift he can feel but cannot name. Schnarch described this as the system's homeostatic response to differentiation. Homeostasis is the system's tendency to return to its previous equilibrium. When one person moves, the system pushes back toward where it was, and the push can come in many forms, most of which are designed to return her to the familiar orientation. The guilt she already feels about choosing herself is part of that homeostatic pressure. So is his potential activation, if it comes, which will carry the pull of everything familiar and the implicit invitation to return to the previous configuration. Understanding this does not mean she has to refuse the contact, or harden against him, or manage this shift with the cold, strategic calculation of someone who is playing a game. She is not playing a game. She is becoming herself. And becoming yourself is not a strategy. It is a direction. The homeostatic pressure is simply something to recognize when it arrives, to see it clearly for what it is, so that she is not reabsorbed into the previous configuration before the new one has had time to take root. Here is something honest about where you are right now. You have been tracking this journey in your own mind, carrying the weight of every shift, every sign, every moment where something moved between you, in the interior of your own memory. And memory, especially inside something this emotionally intense, is not a neutral record. It compresses, it edits. The hard weeks blur together. The moments of genuine growth become less visible from inside the current difficulty than they were when they were happening. And you lose the evidence of how far you have already traveled. Not because the travel did not happen, but because the record was never written down. The Twin Flame Journey Tracker and Progress Workbook exists for exactly this moment in the journey. Not the beginning when everything is raw and new. This moment, the late separation, when you have done more work than you can fully see and you need something to show you that the movement has been real. 39 pages. An 8-stage journey tracker so you can locate yourself precisely and watch your actual month-to-month movement rather than only feeling it vaguely. A synchronicity log because the signs that arrive during a shift like the one you are experiencing right now deserve to be documented, not lost in the blur of weeks. A daily self-love checklist that keeps you at the center of your own story during the phase when choosing yourself is the primary work. Weekly reflections and monthly reviews that create visible evidence of transformation in a season when the transformation is real but the evidence is easy to miss. The link is below. This is where the understanding needs to be handled carefully, because the language of choosing yourself, of detachment, of releasing the outcome, is everywhere in twin flame content, and it is almost always misapplied. Choosing yourself is not the same as stopping loving him. Differentiation, in Bowen's framework, is not emotional withdrawal. It is not building a wall. It is not deciding that the connection was a mistake, or that the love was a wound, or that the healthiest version of the story ends with her fully indifferent to what they were and what they still are. A differentiated person can love deeply. More deeply, actually, than someone who is fused because the love is not contaminated by the fear of losing the self inside it. It is clean. It is offered from a whole person rather than from a contracted version of one. What she is releasing is not the love. She is releasing the management. The continuous low-level monitoring of his state and his distance and his potential return. The editing of herself to remain compatible with wherever he is in his process. The way she has been holding the connection from a posture of quiet desperation. Present as something loving but functioning as a kind of emotional surveillance. A constant tracking of the field between them for signals that either reassure or alarm. That management was exhausting. She knows it was exhausting. She has felt it as exhaustion for a long time without quite naming it as the source. The choosing of herself that is available to her right now, under this sky, with Venus pressing on the nodes and asking her to decide, is the release of the management. The return to herself as the primary project. The decision to tend to her own interior life with the same dedication and attention she has been giving to the monitoring of his. And here is what Schnarch found, and what the Twin Flame framework has always carried underneath its spiritual language. The version of her that emerges from that return is not someone who loves less. It is someone whose love is finally available to be given from a full place rather than a depleted one. A love that does not need him to do anything specific in order to remain intact. A love that belongs to her regardless of what he does with it. That is a different quality of love than what has been operating in this separation. And it is the only version of love that can actually sustain what this connection is building toward. The lunar nodes are sometimes described as the axis of destiny. The south node carries what the soul has already learned, the patterns and orientations that are familiar but that no longer serve the direction the soul is moving. The north node carries the medicine, the direction that is unfamiliar and therefore uncomfortable, and therefore exactly where the growth lives. With Venus squaring that axis today, the invitation is precise. The south node side of the square is the familiar love that costs her herself, the love organized around him as the primary reference point, the love that requires her continuous editing, the love that has kept her on the smaller side of herself for the length of this separation. The north node side is the love that knows itself, the love that can be offered without the sacrifice of the person offering it, the love that does not require his participation in order to remain whole. The choice she is being asked to make is not whether to love him. It was never about that. The choice is which version of herself she is going to bring to that love. The contracted version that has been managing and monitoring and editing, or the full one that is beginning, right now, to remember that she was always complete before he arrived and is still complete in his absence. This is not easy. It is one of the hardest moves this journey asks for, because the contracted version of herself has been a form of love too. It has contained real devotion, the willingness to make herself smaller in the service of keeping something sacred alive is not a nothing. It is a thing she did because she loved something real. And releasing it requires acknowledging that the love was real while also acknowledging that the form it took has cost her in ways she is only beginning to fully count. Venus square the nodes today is not gentle with that acknowledgement. It presses on it. It makes the cost visible in a way that can no longer be managed down into something tolerable. And in making the cost visible, it makes the choice available in a way it has not quite been before. She does not have to choose dramatically. She does not have to declare anything or break anything or make a gesture that the outside world can see. The choice is internal, a reorientation of where her primary loyalty now lives. A quiet movement of attention from the monitoring of the field between them back toward the interior of her own becoming. A hand releasing what it has been holding, not because the thing held was not precious, but because the holding has been happening at the expense of the hand itself. That is the moment. It is available right now, this week, under the sky, with the nodes pressing on Venus and Venus pressing on the nodes and the whole configuration creating a friction that has, for the first time in a long time, made staying the same more uncomfortable than moving forward. She is ready for this. She has been ready for longer than the fear has been willing to admit, and the version of her that emerges from this choice, the full one, the unedited one, the one who has finally remembered that she is the answer and not the question, is the version that this connection has been trying to reach all along. He cannot meet her where she has been. The contracted version of herself could never have given him what this soul contract was built to exchange. The full version can. And she is the only one who has the power to become her. That is what she is doing right now. That is what this week is.